God is not waiting for you on the other side of your pain. He is right there with you in the middle of it. Welcome to A Catholic Journey. I'm your host, Jessica Diaz. If you're grieving, searching for hope, or just beginning to explore your faith, this is a place for honest conversations, real struggles, and the peace that comes from drawing closer to God. Let's walk this journey together. Before I get into today's episode, I want to share something really special with you. If you've been feeling like you want more structure in your relationship with God, my friend Audrey and I created something just for you. It's called The Daily Thread, and it's really for those of us who feel like we're constantly juggling everything, and faith can sometimes feel like just one more thing on the list. The goal of The Daily Thread is to flip that, to make your relationship with God the foundation, so everything else flows from there. Each month, we put together a workbook based on the daily Mass readings, with reflections that are meant to meet you right where you are, whether that's in your family, your work, or just your own personal growth. And through the podcast, we go even deeper into each month's theme together. If you want to be more intentional in your faith, but you're not sure where to start, this is for you. Doors open April 21st, so mark your calendars. And make sure to follow us on Instagram at Daily Thread Podcast for more updates. All the details are in the show notes, and we would love to have you join us. Now let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to a new episode of A Catholic Journey. In the last episode, I shared some practical steps that helped me grow closer to God after I lost my parents back in 2022. In today's episode, I want to share some of the lessons I learned about God through my grief. Losing my parents changed what I thought I knew about my faith. It changed what I thought I knew about a lot of things, if I'm being honest, but for the purposes of this episode, I'm just going to focus on faith. My faith stopped being something that I just talked about. Like I would say, yeah, I believe in God, but I didn't do anything or practiced anything of my faith. And so it started to become something that I really, truly started to rely on and started implementing in my life. Psalms 34:18 says, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." If I'm being honest, I didn't even know this Bible verse existed until after I lost my parents. But when I read it, it was a moment where I felt like I had to decide, is this something I'm truly going to believe in? Or am I just going to chalk this up to like an inspiring quote that we see on social media? But in my grief, at least for me personally, my grief didn't push God away. In fact, it was quite the opposite. My grief opened my heart up and showed me who God really is when life gets super hard. So the first lesson, and this is in no particular order, is that God is near even when we don't feel him. One thing grief made very real for me is that God doesn't step back from our pain. If anything, he meets us right in the middle of it, because it's in this space that we actually allow ourselves to encounter him. Psalms 147 verse 3 says, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." Now, this doesn't mean that the pain magically goes away and we no longer feel grief and we're super duper happy all the time. It means that God is there with us in our suffering. We are not alone in it. I used to think that closeness to God would be something you feel clearly, a type of euphoria, like, oh, once I feel God, I'm never going to hurt again, right? But my grief has taught me something completely different. God's presence and our emotions for the day are not the same thing. There were days that I didn't feel comfort. I didn't feel direction. I didn't feel much of anything spiritually, right? I just felt awful and sad, and sometimes I felt like I was in this state of despair. But as time progressed and as I started to grow in my faith, I realized that God is near because of who he is, not because what I'm feeling. Our weakness doesn't push God away from us. It reminds us that we can't carry everything on our own. And that's where the trust in God begins to grow, right? Because when we're in our grief, when we're hurting, when we're in pain, you can convince yourself that you're all alone and that you're suffering this pain by yourself, but God is there with you, wanting you to hand over your pain to him so that he can help you carry it. So if you're listening to this and you feel far from God, that doesn't mean he's far away from you. The second lesson I learned is that God does not remove every cross. This was a big, big lesson for me. Because I feel like we sometimes confuse God's love for us as meaning that everything is going to go our way. Life's going to be perfect. We're never going to feel pain, hurt. And if things aren't going our way, then that must mean that He doesn't love us as much. But that is so far from the truth. And the best way I can explain this is I'm a mom. I love my kids. When I tell you I adore my kids, I would do anything for them. And they still have to go through hard times. They're still going to experience disappointment. They're still going to have struggles. They're still going to get their video games taken away if they don't listen and do their chores, right? Because me loving them doesn't mean that life is going to be perfect. And it also doesn't mean that I love my children any less. And it's the same with God, right? Because He loves us. He loves us so much. God loves us so much that He died for us. Jesus died for us. And we still have to carry our crosses. We're still going to experience disappointment, grief, pain, hurt. And it's not because God is punishing us, and it's not because He loves us any less. It's because our life experiences are meant to refine us. Our faith does not prevent sorrow, but it changes how we walk through it. Second letter to the Corinthians 1, verses 3-4 says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all consolation, who consoles us in all our afflictions, so that we may be able to console those who are in any affliction, with the consolation with which we ourselves are consoled by God." See, God comforts us while we're going through the pain, the grief, the stress, the divorce, the job loss, the heartache, the disappointments, not just after it's over. And that's what makes the real difference. Comfort didn't always look like relief, right? Sometimes comfort looked like endurance, like I just had to survive the day. Sometimes it looked like simply getting through a day that felt heavy from beginning to end. I learned that God didn't always change what I was facing, but I realized that I wasn't facing the pain alone anymore. And over time, as I started to deepen my faith, I realized that the comfort I was receiving from God was something that I can offer up to others. I know that suffering doesn't make us experts, but it makes us more understanding when others are hurting. So when someone I know experiences loss now, I'm able to meet them in their pain and offer an understanding and a compassion that I didn't have before because I hadn't experienced it myself. The third lesson I learned about God is that we can pray in the pain. Before my parents passed away, my prayers were usually for things that I already had, right? Blessings I already received. Kind of like an afterthought. Like, hey, thanks for the vacation I booked, God. That's awesome. Thanks for the raise I got. I'm so blessed. And while that isn't inherently wrong, right? Because gratitude is always good. After my parents passed away, I didn't know what to thank God for. Because what did I have to be thankful for? My parents were gone. I was sad. I was angry. I felt lost. And so when I would go to pray, I would feel like I didn't have the words. I didn't have clarity. I didn't know what I was asking for because my usual prayers were always just thanks for this and thanks for that. But Romans 8:26 tells us, "Likewise the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought. But that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words." See, I was worried that not knowing how to pray meant that I was failing at my faith or failing at praying. But then I learned that that actually was a place where God was already at work in my heart. He knew I was suffering. He knew I was in pain. And just sitting in that quiet and spending time with Him with no words, but just tears, God knew what I meant. I was praying. I just didn't have the words to express what I was feeling. And what was very humbling for me was that my grief stripped away this illusion of control that I thought my prayers had to have. And in that space, I began to see that God wasn't waiting for me to just be strong and find the words and have the clarity. He met me in my weakness. He was working even when I felt incapable. And that's when prayer shifted for me. It became less about saying the right thing and more about being honest with God and where I was. And honesty, as messy as it is still a powerful, powerful act of trust that we can offer God. And the fourth thing that I learned about God during this journey is that hope and grief can exist together. I think this is one of the hardest things to understand, because when you're grieving, at least for me, I don't know if you felt this way, if you've experienced grief and you felt this way, but I used to feel guilty if I laughed because I was grieving. And so I think like this is such an important lesson, because hope and grief can literally exist at the same time. Joy and pain can exist at the same time. Happiness and hurt can exist at the same time. Grief doesn't disappear when we believe. Faith changes how we understand loss and how we carry our grief. So as my faith got deeper, it didn't stop my grief from happening. I'm still sad. I still miss my parents every single day. But what ended up happening was that my faith started to change how I understood loss. And therefore it changed how I carried my grief. Because grief can go two ways, right? When we're brokenhearted, when we're grieving, and this doesn't necessarily have to be grief from losing someone. It can be grief from divorce, grief from a huge life change. Whatever pain we're feeling can always lead us in two directions. We can follow the direction of despair. My life is over. I can't move on. Everything's done with and over with. I'm going down a bottomless pit to hell, right? Because that's the mindset we can have. We can allow the enemy to win because he's the one that's feeding us all this junk into our minds. Or we can turn our gaze up to God and take our despair and take our emptiness and take our fear and our anger and our distrust and our loss of faith, and we can say, God, here, help me carry this, because I can't do it alone. And I think that's what makes faith so personal and so deep. It's that, yes, we're still going to have crosses to carry, but God will not let us do that alone. But we have to open the door to him. We have to open our hearts and open the door and let him in, because God won't force his way in. He's not a forceful God in that way. He will not force us to love him. He will not force us to follow him, right? Because that's where our free will comes in. But I promise you, he is standing there right in front of you, hands open, arms wide open to receive you. But you have to open your heart to him. You have to open the door. You have to be willing to receive his love. And then in prayer, offer your love and your time back to him, because that's what makes relationship with God. You can know who God is all day long, right? Just like I know the librarian at my library, I know who she is, but I am not in relationship with her. But I know my children, and I am in relationship with them. I want to know about their lives. I want to know how their day was. I want to talk to them all the time, because that's what you do when you're in relationship with someone you love. You spend time with them. And so in the space of grief, we get to choose. We get to choose how we carry it and who we walk with in our journey. When I look back right after my parents passed away, I'm so thankful. I really am. And it's going to sound so bad. I'm not thankful that my parents passed away, right? That was the hardest thing that I ever experienced in my entire life. But in my grief, experiencing grief that way allowed me to open my eyes and get a better understanding of who God really, really is. And so for that part, I'm grateful, because I learned that God is a God who stays close to the brokenhearted, truly. He has not left my side in the last 4 years, and I'm so thankful. He is a God that gives strength in ways that are often quiet. God's not yelling at me, but I can feel when he's giving me strength. He works even when we feel weak, even when we don't feel him. And he holds hope steady for us when life feels so uncertain. And that is the God who I've come to know and love. I love him so much because he loves me so much. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." God's not saying, hey, come to me when you have it all figured out. Come to me when you feel strong, okay? Do those push-ups. He didn't say any of that. He says, come to me carrying whatever it is you're carrying. Just show up. And the part where he says rest, I will give you rest. That doesn't mean that poof, all your pain and despair goes away. It means that we don't have to carry it alone anymore. And isn't that just so amazing? I'm really proud of myself because last episode I was really good. I didn't cry. And so my OCIA team tells me that God gave me the gift of tears. And believe it or not, that's something that I've also struggled in accepting, right? Because at first I'm like, God, you couldn't give me any other gift. It had to be the gift of tears. I'm such a crybaby. And sometimes when I'm at church and I'm just listening to the gospel or listening to the homily, and oftentimes whatever the homily is something that I feel like God is saying directly to me. I don't know if you felt that before, but I just get so emotional. It's like this overwhelming gratitude. And so it's just really, really powerful stuff, you guys. And I can't even begin to explain how it feels. And also with that amazing feeling, there's days when I feel nothing, but I know God is there. And so that's like the most important thing I want to emphasize, because I feel like when we have those days of feeling nothing, it oftentimes can be discouraging from moving on and continuing forward in this faith journey. And so I digress. I want to leave you with something to sit with until the next episode, and that's: how has suffering changed the way you see God? And if you're grieving right now, I want you to hold on to this. Please know that God is not waiting for you on the other side of your pain. He is right there with you in the middle of it. My grief hasn't given me all the answers, and it's not something that I'm over, but my grief has taken me on this faith journey of mine, and it has showed me who God is when life is super hard. I hope this episode has brought you some peace. If you aren't following the podcast already, I invite you to do so. And feel free, as always, to share this episode with someone you think needs to hear it. I would love to hear from you. You can email me or comment on the episode, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you for continuing this journey with me, and I'll see you in the next episode. God bless. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find the podcast and become part of this community. Until next time, remember, where Jesus leads the way, we are called to follow.